All right, if it's okay with everybody, who do we have? We have, I see Paul's here. Okay, that's good. Right, so let's get tonight's meeting started. Vonnie, if you would you do a roll call for the board, please?
Okay, we have Guy Rosenbaum.
Here.
John Barnett.
Here.
Suzanne Manhines.
Here.
Paul Burns.
Here.
Okay, she did say she was going to be maybe late or not able to attend due to car issues. Dennis King.
Here.
Bob Snedden. Yeah. Oh, I think he's coming on right now. Bob Snedden, do we have you on? I think Bob's just getting his audio connected, probably. He just showed up.
We'll give him a minute to get situated here.
Bob Snedden, do we have you on?
Yeah, I'm trying to get my camera, my video on. There it is. Okay, there I am. Found out somebody had done most of my job that I went to go do, so.
Great.
All right, is that everybody, Vonnie?
Yes, we're just missing Diana, and she said she might be late or not at all.
Okay. Can we mute whoever's right? So in an effort to make these meetings work as they should for the board has the option of unmuting and speaking whenever they need to, or if you want, get Vonnie's attention by using the hand raise function. And I'm going to try to do a better job of making sure that everybody, gets all the time they need to say whatever it is they want to say. I think I've been cutting people off, and I don't mean to. So if I've done that to you, I'm very, very sorry. And just be as rooted with me as you need to be to make sure that you get an opportunity to say what you need to say, because it's important that every board member gets what's going on. Okay, for tonight's meeting, we have an agenda. What email is that? I'm sorry, Vonnie, I don't have that email in front of me. Can you put up your agenda real quick, Vonnie?
Sure.
Thanks, because we got to vote on that.
I don't know if I'll do it real quick, but I'll do it.
So tonight, while Vonnie's putting that up, there we go. There's only one thing on here, I believe. Keep going down. Thank you. There we go. Well, we're not going to approve the May 20th agenda, are we? Or that's today. Sorry, we're going to approve today's agenda. Okay. So sorry. So the only two things I'd like to see come out of today's meeting is, one, I've asked Mike Harkleroad to speak to the board about where education's at currently and where it looks like it's going in the near-term future.
Mr. Chair, if I might,
yes,
would you like to approve the agenda and then we can go into that discussion?
Sure, but we don't actually have anything on the agenda, so I was going to explain what the agenda was before.
Oh, okay. I got you. I'm sorry.
If that's okay, I'm freewheeling a little bit, but we're good. So on the agenda, we'll have Mike Harkleroad speak about where education is and where it looks like it's going. And then there are two questions I think we ought to answer at this work session. One, do we see a problem as a board in a school district with connectivity going forward? And two, if we do see a problem, do we want to direct our administrative staff to start looking for solutions to that problem? I don't think, and I'm open, but I don't think we need to get into the minutiae of how to solve a problem just yet. But we have a lot of really smart people that work for us, and they can probably come up with some really good answers going forward. So with that, I'll open it up for a motion on to approve or not the agenda.
Mr. Chair, be it resolved that the Siuslaw School Board of Directors approve the agenda for May 20th, Resolution 052020-3.3, approval of agenda.
Von
Thank you.
Sneddon, second.
Thank you. Having a motion and a second, do we have any discussion? Bonnie, are you seeing anybody who wants to discuss?
Not.
Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Okay. Rosenbaum,
Aye.
John Barnett,
Yes.
Suzanne Manheims,
Yes.
Paul Burns,
Yes.
Diana Pimlott is not here, sorry. Dennis King
Yes.
and Bob Sneddon.
Yes.
Carries unanimously. Okay, so with that in mind, Bonnie, if you would please put everybody's faces back up, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. H. Mr. H, you're muted.
You had to go tell him.
How's that for an inauspicious start? Sorry. And sorry to everybody watching along for that. One of the things I love about our schools and our school system is that we have all comers. We have our families who struggle and need more from us. And we have our families of means who have a right to expect and frankly deserve a first-class education for their kids. And they all come to the same school. They're students sit next to each other and largely are unaware of each other and of the conditions that others have at home. Schools have always been an equalizer force in our society. A free public education is one of the pillars of American democracy. And we have inequities in other places as well, and we've addressed those over the years and continue to address those. I think our schools do face an uncertain future. I think we have to evolve, we have to adjust, we have to maintain relevancy in an age where parents have more and more options. And none of that is specific to COVID-19. I think COVID-19 has put a spotlight on some of those inequalities, and they matter that much more when we're discussing connectivity as being a major issue. The online component of the distance learning that we've pivoted to is going to stay with us no matter what form we come back to in the fall. We will have elements of online learning stick with us, even at the elementary school. I spent time last week saying that we're struggling through this. That said, we're getting better. We're getting better and better at this model, and our students are getting better and better at learning in this model. And we're in a period, I think, of rapid growth in terms of online options. The varying degrees of internet access has definitely been a barrier for some of our families and certainly for some of our students. It's not the only barrier though. Even if we were to get internet access to students, the other end of that access has to be a device of some sort that's going to get kids on board. We've taken care of a good deal of that problem. I think there will come a time when internet access, reliable high-speed internet access will be an element for the public, and it will become a public responsibility to provide that. That might not be through the schools. It very well might be. Guy, you asked for two specific questions. I'd like to add a third, if I might. Do we currently see a connectivity problem? Yes, we do. And it's the connectivity problem is also an equity problem. Is it ours to fix? I'm not sure, but I think schools over time have taken on other responsibilities that weren't ours to fix. There was a time when transportation to schools was an access problem, an equitability problem, and schools fixed that with busing. There was a time when, and still is a time when, food insecurity is a barrier that doesn't necessarily fit under the umbrella of education and what we do, but the schools have stepped up to fix it. Non-English speakers are definitely a barrier that isn't particularly a school problem, yet that is ours to fix. I can make the case that providing internet access, because it is also providing access to education, would be ours to fix as well. Guy, the third question I'd like to add is this the time? And that's where I'm a little less certain. I think a thoughtful, rolled out approach to deliver internet service to those who don't have it, to improve internet service for those who have spotty services, spotty connectivity now, is a good approach and more of an evolution instead of a revolution. I'm not sure the current plan is going to hit enough students next year to be a solution during the COVID-19 crisis. I would encourage the board to think of this beyond the current circumstances of COVID-19 and recognize that no matter what conditions we have in the greater community, we're going to have more and more need to be using and utilizing the internet for instructional delivery. Even at the elementary school, certainly at the upper grades. I don't know exactly what we're coming back to next fall, and that makes it a real cloudy crystal ball, and I know everybody recognizes that same set of challenges. So, Guy, I think that's about it and where I think we're headed. I think if we don't have a role to play in shaping education, it's going to take shape around us and we'll be caught in a period of adjustment and reaction. And I know the professionals in this district and the parents in this community don't want us to be caught in that position. They'd rather see us out front and taking the lead. I just don't know about the time frame of providing internet for all next year is feasible considering the other budgetary constrictions and reductions that we're facing.
Okay, thank you. Are you done? I'm sorry, are you done?
I am, yes, I'm happy to take any questions and offer any more if you'd like.
That's where we're at. So questions or anything you'd like to solicit from us? Hang on, let's start with the board, Andy, and then we'll get to you in just a sec. Vani, are you seeing anybody on the board that wants to ask Mike any questions?
I am not. I did want to let you know that Diana Pimlott joined. Diana Pimlott, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Vani, can you let in Shannon Graham, please?
I don't show that I have everybody in that I can see.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
No, so today's superintendent's ODE meeting, we were looking at, the potential, social distancing or physical distancing guidelines for schools for next fall. And again, we are, call it 3.5 months out, and they will change again. But right now we're talking about having a minimum need of 35 square foot per person in a room. And based on the physical size of our classrooms, that's realistically, that's like 15 to 18 people. So, and again, what Mike was talking about is the need for internet, because we're simply not going to have, we physically can't have every kid on campus every single day. So again, last meeting, we talked about possibilities of like hybrid opens, to school, kids being on rotational attendance and then needing to be on distance, learning for 2, if not 3 additional days per week. So 2 on campus and then 2 or 3 in some mode of distance learning. And as that comes back to what we've been talking about for internet connectivity, obviously a fiber optic network would be the best option, but really where we're talking about with this is taking on a public works project. And when Carrie Blake comes on, she can talk a little more about the, procurement and regulations around a public works project. And again, it's a driver that schools are going to be pushing because there hasn't been a push at other levels of government to kind of look at internet access as a public or a municipal utility, almost a necessity like electricity, water, sewer. We're in a modern society and that's going to happen. Do we need to provide some level of internet access to kids? Yes. How do we do that in the most cost-effective means is the next question. And we started out with looking at the fiber optic project as a potential that was, the ultimate resource. We could provide, I don't even know if it would be fair to call it comparable, but we could probably provide some relief for providing a usable resource, considering that we are going to have some portion of our kids that are medically fragile that can't attend next fall, no matter what the start looks like. We will have some students that don't come to school because there's someone else in their home that's medically fragile and can't risk that exposure. And so, yes, some level of internet access is going to have to be, I guess, facilitated by the district. And again, I don't know the exact method that would be done. I mean, it could be, buying volume subscriptions on current services, subsidizing other subscriptions, but again, students are going to need access beyond the day, because at this point in time with the 35, 35 square foot per person, kind of limit, we just simply can't have every kid on campus every day. And so we're going to have to do some sort of rotational piece. The other day when we were talking about this in the admin group, I kept coming back to, it's 15 to 20 people, most likely going to be 18 per classroom. And when you look at an 800 square foot classroom, that's pretty well, 35 square feet for the, 15 or 16 kids that are in there, plus an adult. And that's, that's kind of where we're at. And I wish I knew the number, exactly where we're going to be come September 7th next year, but I just don't.
Guy, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. I
Your
just
turn.
said thank you, Andy. Any questions or comments for Andy? Thank you. None? Okay. All right, so I brought this before the board, and I'm pretty sure the board knows how I feel about this, but I also want the board to understand that I accept the fact that often I'm early and often I'm wrong. We've got 2 issues coming in front of us from where I sit. One is we're going to have to run some sort of modified on-school, off-school project going forward next year, which is going to require the use of distance learning, one way, shape, or form or another. Whether or not it's the district's responsibility to help those who don't have access to internet or those who can't afford internet, I'm not sure. And I don't have the answer to that question. And frankly, that's why we're in this meeting talking to one another. I depend on you guys to tell me, hey, you know, this is what we think. So you know, I need to know where you guys sit, and more importantly, the administration needs to know where you guys sit, and what you want them to do going forward in this issue. And unfortunately, the second problem rears its ugly head in the face of all of this, and that's these what the state is projecting enormous budget cuts to education, which is going to be an issue. We've frankly, this year is not going to be too bad. I think Carrie could chime in on that. I think we can pretty much count on this year being okay, but next year is going to be bad unless something changes. You know, the creek doesn't rise and things do work out. And we're going to have to make some tough decisions coming forward. And this is the beginning of that process. So again, I'd like to open it up. You guys tell the administration, tell me, tell the world where you at and what you think. And I see you have your hand up there. Go right ahead. I'll shut up.
Who are you calling on, Guy?
Sorry, I just realized you can't. I'm calling on you. Sorry.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge the hours and hours of effort that went into organizing and presenting so much information for tonight's meeting. I know Carrie Blake and Andy and you, Guy, and Tammy Trenholm have all spent a lot of time, Mike as well, trying to work out some alternative possibilities. Now, I guess the one in my mind that is most appealing because of budget cuts and because of feasibility and having it ready to go more quickly would be the concept of having Wi-Fi on buses. But I would really like a kind of a true life scenario of how that would work. I'm a fourth grader and I live off of Clear Lake Road. How will that work for me? And maybe Andy, you might be the best one, or maybe Tammy would be the best to kind of go through what that would look like for me on a day when I'm not coming to school.
I can jump in here a little, Andy, if you want me to start. And so Suzanne, I don't know 100% what that would look like. In talking with Springfield, what they are doing is deploying buses out into as open areas as possible. They are regularly getting 1,000 feet of distance. However, you know, that changes with weather, it changes with the sites. And what it looks like for them is someone pulls up into the empty parking lot. If they can't reach it from the building they're in, they would have to drive to the bus and they would be able to log on to the Wi-Fi. They have it set up where it's not password protected, so anyone can jump right on. The transportation supervisor there is also very up on IT as well. And so he actually monitors on a dashboard the usage of it so he can see who's getting good service, who's not. He can also pinpoint when people jump on to stream movies on Netflix, say example, and they can just boot those people off of the system right there. That's kind of how it's looking for Springfield. Here, it's just a conceptual idea right now. I don't know exactly, you know, our demographics, our geography is a little bit challenging here in terms of getting Wi-Fi signal out. And so my idea, I would love to see us be able to put buses in neighborhoods that we could identify pockets of students that might need this, that we could find a space to park a bus in a neighborhood that would allow people to stay in their homes. Again, I'm not 100% sure how that's working. I do know Springfield has been very happy with the programs they went and have found it to be successful in their area.
Okay. So again, you mentioned a kid that lives out on Clear Lake Road. So we have to drive the bus and realistically, we're talking about the bus being like a fixed Wi-Fi broadband, transceiver. And so if there's any trees in the way, it might be an issue, but we've got to get within, I know the clear range is 1,000 feet, but you got to be, I think, reasonably within 500 feet. Then that bus has to sit there and park for the entire time that kid needs access. And so with as remote as some of those areas are, it's going to come down to how much time are we going to allot to a location and how close we can get kids there. And there are spots out in the rural areas where we've got Grange halls and fire stations where we can tell parents that we'll be here, at this location at this Grange hall, and we'll be here from 9 o'clock to 11 a.m. And then need to move on to the next location. Again, if we outfit all of our buses to do this, we're employing all of our bus drivers, at least 8 hours a day to make at least 3 stops of 2 to 2.5 hours each to make that happen. And so we're going to be on a fairly tight schedule doing that. Some of the more rural areas, we're going to get to a point where going to a fixed location, but not using a bus, but using either a satellite or a cable or like a copper connection to create like a mini lab out in a fire station. Works better than that. The bus idea is much more feasible in city limits.
Paul, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was actually, Andy just got my point I was going to bring up about, what the Grange halls and the fire stations out there of setting up something remotely that was there all time would allow for use for those people to come in and use it on their schedules and be easier for, there's parking areas there and that sort of thing. So I think that it's definitely not optimal, but it could be used out there.
Right, and as like a component to that, we can put up, broadcast antennas, out of the fixed windows in the buildings and turn, the parking lots to some degree into those parkable areas too. When we talk about using a moving source like a bus, we just can't leave it out in front of somebody's house for all day. It's going to have to go from location to location, and that's where we get a problem.
And if I may add to that too, this again does not address any of those, far outlier students. Satellite's really the only thing I think that I've come across that might even work. So that would not address those students, I don't believe.
Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify my understanding of it. Now, the mobile hotspots in the buses, I wouldn't anticipate that we would do these for a single individual family or student. The way I interpreted Carrie talking about with Springfield was they would go to a spot, people would congregate around that either in their car or if their house was happened to be close enough to it. Kind of like people going to the library parking lot, Siuslaw Public Library parking lot and using the Wi-Fi in the parking lot. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, good, thanks.
If I may, and Mike, I was actually going to call on you here. Mike, could you give us an example of what an interactive class is going to look like, more or less going forward, so that the board understands what kind of connectivity is required?
It could look different at different grade levels for different topics. Currently, it looks as well, aside from the Google Classroom function, which is sort of the like this only through a classroom space. We've discussed, not at great length, we've discussed flipped classrooms where teachers are recording lessons, and we have some of that happening now. So the lesson is rather static, and a meet session of sorts would be for guided practice. There are a good number of assignments that we've already worked into the online template using Google Slides, where the students can download and make a home version of a copy, save it, and upload it. It's not just the teachers who've made great leaps and bounds in the last couple of months, our students have as well. They're getting better and better at how to navigate the system. And certainly the older kids live there and it's much more intuitive. But I could see, Guy, where kids could, we'd have to find another way to do it, another task to learn on the computers where students could save their lessons until they're at a hotspot and then show up at the hotspot and fire it off to class. And that could be how they turn it in. I can certainly see a model where students are working offline on assignments that they download at times they have Wi-Fi. So it could be a trip to a hotspot to load the assignments that they would need for a day, a trip home to work on those assignments, then back to the hotspot to fire it back to class. And that would require us to make some lessons that could respond to that model. And there's nothing I've seen thus far that tells me that our teachers won't adjust and won't find a way to make that work. We've also discussed possibly having lessons or a week's worth of work loaded onto a thumb drive that would be delivered to a student, loaded with assignments for them to use when they're offline. And we can collect that thumb drive later on in a different bus run or possibly even through the mail and have, curry assignments back and forth using a thumb drive or a couple of different thumb drives. That's not one we've experimented with at the elementary school, though we have some of the equipment and we're ready to go with it. I don't think there is much currently at the elementary school that requires constant online activity through the duration of an assignment. It requires students to be online for the beginning to receive an assignment and at the end to turn an assignment in. And my daughter routinely works on her assignments offline, completes them and logs back in to turn it in. And that can continue in this model.
Thank you, Mike. Would anybody at the middle school or high school like to kind of do the same thing? Just give us an idea of what we're looking at there from an online perspective.
Yeah, I think it looks quite a bit different at the middle school. We're delivering instruction pretty much 5 days a week in about 25-minute class period sessions right now. And if we're to continue an online instruction, I'd like to see that at minimum, if not a little bit more robust. And a lot of our textbooks, McGraw-Hill for science and social studies, are online textbooks. I don't know the extent at which they could be used offline, if you could download them and use them in an offline format and then complete the assignment and then reconnect. But I think the connection is a little bit more critical on a daily basis for middle school. I'd imagine high school is pretty similar.
Yeah, as we've been talking about what the high school needs, again, they've got the greatest amount of just content delivery that needs to happen, and they're working online in essence 3 hours a day with kids, and the kids are also doing additional work beyond that, which requires some online connection, and kind of looking at what we would do in terms of being able to take care of kids at the high school in a hybrid model. Again, we've talked about doing 2 consecutive days for one group, 2 consecutive days for another, and then having an online day. So in essence, at the high school, you would see all the 9th and 10th graders on campus on a Monday and a Tuesday, for example, with all teachers teaching all those kids spread out across all the rooms. So we've cut the population in half. Wednesday is a deep clean day for the building, but Wednesday is also a common online day. And then on Thursday and Friday, you have the 11th and the 12th graders all on campus to do the instruction that is harder to do or you can't do online. And then the 9th and the 10th graders are doing their supplemental distance learning on Thursday, Friday. So you've got in essence, the juniors and seniors going online Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, on campus Thursday, Friday. And then you've got the 9th and the 10th graders going online, they're on campus Monday, Tuesday, and then online Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And again, we're trying to keep to that anticipated physical distancing safety piece that we need.
Would a schedule like that, Andy, or somebody at the high school, would that allow for some CTE classes to start back up?
Yes, it would. And right now, the two things that are allowed for single person instruction are CTE certifications and GED testing. Because again, if you're working in a CTE program, you can talk all the machine settings you want for the type of metal you're working on, but a kid's going to have to come in and demonstrate a weld. Period. I mean, there's no way for you to do virtual TIG welding. You got to come in, turn the machine on, set your braces, set your electrodes, and run a bead. There's no other way around it. And that would be allowed in this format. So you would have, again, all of that group, again, you have the freshmen and the sophomores that had CTE classes being able to do those on a Monday, Tuesday, and the seniors doing those on a Thursday, Friday.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a couple more questions. And I see a couple other issues in addition to expanding the Wi-Fi coverage, through fiber or something. I think we need to look, there's the child care aspect is rearing its head down the line. I'm just putting that as a placeholder. But regarding the mobile hotspots, Andy or Carrie, maybe you can answer this, but whoever can. Does the mobile hotspot have to be mobile? I mean, we have a couple concentrations of high need populations in some of the material we received, the St. Vincent de Paul housing across the middle school. There's quite a few students there that, if we got a good group of students, can we just set up a hotspot on a permanent basis?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
yes.
Yeah.
And what I would say in some of those areas, the bus hotspot is not the better version.
Right.
Is Carrie sent a bunch of information on actually just physical LTE hotspots that you could literally drop off in one apartment to service, part of a complex.
Or a common area or whatever.
Or a common area, right? Because most of the apartment complexes have a common building.
Yeah.
They've got some sort of meeting house, or I don't know what you want to call it. But even then, you could go in and you could, if it was close to a fiber line or a copper line, run one line to that, and then put a wireless router in that building, and then the kids can go there as they need. When we talk about this and we talk about all the different nooks and crannies in the school district, there's no one size fits all. It's going to be a mosaic of different service providers to have this happen.
I also want to know about, you've talked about the hybrid model coming back, and until you mentioned it tonight, it really hadn't even occurred to me that you really have three distinct styles that you have to address, from the K-5 to the middle school to the high school. We're going to have parents going back to work and aren't going to be able to leave their K-5 kids at home to do online stuff. Are we going to be able to make a provision for, and I know this is slightly off topic, but for taking care of those kids maybe back on premises during school hours?
Maybe when we're done with the stations, we can move.
Sorry, if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of address that, because so when this initially broke out, we went into an emergency mode with the city and the first responders and whatnot. And it's if we are in a situation that requires us to maintain distancing, and if children are, and we don't get to make this decision, but if children are, either at risk from the disease or at risk of spreading the disease. We do not have enough room in our school to provide daycare for the community as a whole. We will have to pick and choose who we can and who we can't, remembering that our first duty is as a school. And that's how we operated during the initial phase of this was, first we educate, then we take care of the first responders, or what we looked at initially was the fire and medical people at the hospital taking care of their kids because they've got no choice. They've got to they've got to go to work. And at some point everybody else has to just kind of figure it out. So yeah, it's going to be an issue. Sorry.
Are you ready? Oh, Mr. Chair, I see Austin Ramirez from Lane County. He just raised his hand. One of my questions, I'd ask you to invite him. Just a minute. The dog got a new toy today. Yeah, laugh. I'd ask to have him present on this because I thought maybe he would have some suggestions on how to pay for it. So.
Sure, if there are no objections, he can have the floor. Go ahead, Oscar.
Thanks, everyone. And I'm going to apologize in advance if you hear my dogs chewing on some toys also. They're running around right now. I appreciate the time and the conversation and the opportunity. I'd echo a lot of what Mike said in the beginning to start. This is an equity issue. And I know your jobs are hard and even harder in a COVID situation, and you have to be responsible for educating students. And one of the big gaps we've seen across Lane County, particularly in rural areas, is a lack of fiber-based broadband. Because as has been mentioned, education is evolving, it's changing now and into the future. And particularly as you're trying to make your curriculum resilient and potentially prepare for going in and out of certain restrictions with COVID, what has been a chronic issue, which is a lack of internet access, has now been an emergency issue. So I would just ask that you think of this beyond the COVID lens. Lane County has supported fiber middle mile projects in other parts of the county. We were preparing to do some of that work this upcoming fiscal year as well. Our budget has been severely impacted. And so I am unable to make any financial commitments directly from the county at this point, but we did put together a list of, I think, 10 or so state and federal resources. Some are more feasible than others. It depends on the applicant. A lot of them are being supplemented by federal funds, particularly if it's related to telehealth or teleeducation. So there are some opportunities out there. And even though we can't directly financially support at this time, we do have staff who can help apply for those grants, who can help pursue some of those, see what's feasible. We work with HIAC and other providers constantly on trying to fix this issue. And I want to touch on a question that was brought up earlier, and that was sort of who's going to fix the problem and whose problem is it? And I will say, I don't know if you waited to try and find someone else to fix this, if that would actually happen, to be honest. There are not a lot of communities who have a community partner or an internet service provider of high quality in their community. And so I'm not here to tell you how to spend your money whatsoever or to tell you what to do. I just want to help provide some context that we've seen and some of the barriers we've seen in other parts of the county. This is fiber, and fiber infrastructure, when done right, is infrastructure that lasts upwards of 50 years. So any investment you make in true fiber is a long-term investment that supports current generations of students and future generations of students. Again, think about not just the typical classroom setting that I think we're all used to, but the future of education. And while CTE is difficult, I think you're seeing groups like Elevate Lane County or Connected Lane put together online curriculum that supports workforce needs, right? And helps bring your students from the classroom to the workplace. So there are additional benefits to think about. And I think with this proposal in particular, this solves two problems that we see around the county. Solves the problem of the actual infrastructure being available, and then it also helps solve the problem of whether people can afford high-speed internet. And so I think there are some layers here, there's some benefit here that we don't always see in proposals from providers, particularly when they're large international providers. And so I just think, again, right now, especially, it's hard to find resources. It's hard to spend a lot of money, but think about this beyond COVID and what benefits it could provide. Think of the county as sort of a third-party neutral resource. We work on these things a lot, and we have staff that do. And so if there are questions, I'm happy to help answer them.
Thanks, sir. Any questions or comments? Anybody like to make? And Diane, I'm going to call on you directly because I don't have you up, so I can't see you. I think you're dialed in. Are you wanting to say anything, or do you have any comments?
Well, I'm listening, and the only comment I would make has already been stated. That the budget is what it is. I'm very concerned about the expense of establishing access for all students, but yet I understand the great need for that. And I appreciate the information related to grants, and think we definitely should pursue that avenue to identify monies that could help us, whatever the decision is. At this point, primarily the biggest concern at this point is the budget. How in the world are we going to pay for this? So echoing what everyone else is saying and thinking.
Okay, thank you. And if you would, just jump in, Diane, if you have a comment. I can't see you, and I have no way of knowing if you have something to say. So please just jump in there. Don't worry about it.
I will.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure you will. Dennis, comments, concerns, questions?
At this time, I've taken a few notes here, and one, thanks, Mike, for you spelled out quite a few nice options there, and they were good discussion points. I think my thought really is that in September we don't know what the state's going to require, so I'm on the let's go real slow. As we move forward, we're looking at those options and planning. At this time, I would say I wouldn't vote for spending money to put fiber in the ground. I was trying to look earlier at all the information that came for tonight's meeting, and it looks like 9% of our students, 94 homes is the information that we got. So 9% of the students are in the HIAC designated area. And so that, it doesn't reach all the kids, it reaches a few. Even at that point, I'd say that would require us, and as Carrie sent some information this afternoon, require us to, even on the RFI, is that what it's called? Or whatever we were to do to get that information, we'd have to go through that process to, get the bids. Anyway, it looks like just a lot of money. So from my perspective here, it would be good information. I like the options. It looks like, the state probably will have us doing still some distancing, and that rotation, some of those rotation models sounded good, probably would work. I'd go back to something I said at the board meeting, and that is, and perhaps I heard a little bit of it here tonight, is the assumption that if we simply put a computer and internet connection in every household, that we score a touchdown, that the kids are going to learn, and that's not what's going to happen. So the idea that we're getting kids in, even if it's just 2 days a week for that checkup with the teacher, then you're moving the right way. So my hope is that come September, we're back in 5 days a week. But anyway, those are my thoughts currently.
Good thoughts. And yeah, I'm with you. I think the relationship between students and teachers is where the learning begins. And I'm reminded of that often by some of our staff. I'm sorry, Suzanne, go ahead.
Well, just to refer back to the notes for this evening, there was a question about what about going to the industry itself? And Andy, I think you had a comment about how in the early 2000s, there were millions of dollars given to companies that were providing internet in order to build capacity and build access. Can you speak more to that?
A little bit. Again, when this would be the early 2000s, and there was a lot of block grants to help really expand internet access off of the main trunk lines. And part of that money became tied up in areas where the question was not, are you providing service, but could you provide service? And so in some of the most remote areas, you didn't have a full expansion of copper networks through the area, but they could be serviced by satellite providers. And so if they were able to get coverage, that's where some of the progress stopped. And there weren't further grant monies available to build out hardwire networks. And so again, that's kind of a bigger federal issue than anything else. But in terms of like state level, high-speed internet or rural broadband access, that's been tabled at the last two state legislative sessions. And so it's been caught up in, basic politics right now. And we just kind of happen to be stuck on the tail end of it because we're in an area where that kind of service expansion is lagging and would be of the greatest need. And so we're, in essence, what we're looking at is trying to find a solution to a problem that just hasn't been addressed. And again, it's part of that we're living in a modern society, and is it a necessity or a luxury having access to the internet? And that'll be a philosophical debate. But right now, in looking at what we're doing, of the 1,350 kids in the district now, I took the entire student database, downloaded it by address and bus route. I segmented out the bus routes that live in town and out of town, and then resorted it by address again, filled in the ones and twos. So basically, we have 800 kids that live, from the bridge to Heceta Beach Road, and then, kind of west or east to the North Fork Bridge, right? And then, so again, if we had one single expansive network along, the HIAC map, we could service 60% of the kids. And then looking at just general map coverage for additional providers that would include CenturyLink and Charter, you get 96% of the district could be serviced on an existing copper network. That leaves you 4% that would have to be serviced either by satellite or LTE or some sort of remote location, station. And so, again, there's no one size fits all solution. And so again, it would be a mosaic of services. But again, if we were to go in and the board were to get behind a proposal like HIAC's right now, it becomes a public works project. And with that, we would in essence be on the record for having to maintain that they are meeting all of the state procurement requirements, everything from paying prevailing wage to insurance to safety regulations. In essence, it becomes our project. And so again, it's a bigger issue than we can solve. But what we could do is look to provide some relief to students and families for whatever vendor option would service their home, which is probably again, the better short-term solution. I agree with Mr. King entirely. I would love to be back in September. I don't see that fully happening, but again, 2 days a week, maybe 3, and then trying to provide some relief for kids to be able to have access to what they can't do in school outside. So
that helps, Suzanne? You're still muted.
Yeah, I fixed it. Yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah, and I think, what I've been hearing about the colleges that are projecting opening up, they're saying they're going to open up in some form in late August or early September, but planning to close by Thanksgiving with the anticipation that we'll have a resurgence of COVID over the winter. And so it's likely that whatever's in place is going to need to be in use again over the winter months for some period of time. So, yeah, so, I mean, I guess I would just hope that we would be able to come up with some partners who could help foot the bill. And in the meantime, until we can develop those partners and come up with some more of those fundamental questions answered, it seems like something like providing a cell phone that can do data, and turn into a hotspot might be the best bridge option until we can get further down the road with the idea of the cable, or fiber.
Mr. Chair.
I would just
hang on. Are you good, Suzanne?
Yes.
Go.
Sorry. When I mute, I'm done. But thank you, Guy.
I want to make sure. So Bob, go ahead.
I'd kind of like to move us off center and focus back on what we wanted to talk about tonight. Mr. Chair, the original proposal concept that was brought was to have HIAC extend some extra fiber, because they're already doing fiber in other areas, but the concept was to put it to some specific areas that would increase and reach a lot of the students. Is that right? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, that's not quite right. That's what the paper wrote, but that's not what we asked HIAC. What we asked HIAC was to provide some form of broadband connectivity to every student in the district that was on the free and reduced lunch program for 5 years, and then to provide a discount via some form of high-speed internet to every other student in the district.
Okay, and the estimated cost to us, the district, over 5 years was considerable now, wasn't it?
Over 5 years, it was estimated. It was a real rough estimate, and I wasn't asked to hold anybody to it too much, but it was 1.4 million.
Yeah. Now, but one way that they were going to accomplish that objective was by extending fiber to areas that they don't have right now.
Their plan, and I don't want to put words in their mouth.
Right.
Their plan is to run fiber to those areas no matter what.
Yeah.
So this would have been a way for them to speed that up, as well as use the relationship and the licensing that they have with both satellite internet providers and other internet providers in the area to meet our goal, which was to provide connectivity to, our goal, my goal to provide internet connectivity to those students.
Sorry, the dog just bit me. I'm not comfortable committing ourselves to $1.5 million or even over 5 years right now, because I'm not sure what the financial future is. I mean, we look at the revenue forecast that came out today, and it's an estimated $800 million over this biennium over the state, and that's going to have quite a bit of impact on us. There's also a lot of unknowns about this that I don't think everybody is. Some people are looking at single aspects of this, and I don't think anybody, especially myself, has a full grasp on all of it. I think we should just continue to look at some options, and as staff comes up with some good ideas or new ideas, let us look at them. But I'm not ready to proceed with going ahead and making a contract, or even over the next 60 to 90 days, until we get some more information, because things are changing at light speed. We don't even know what our exact problem is yet. So it's so difficult to come up with a solution to it. And I'm done.
Okay. And okay, go ahead, Dennis. Go ahead.
So with that, I could almost say ditto to Bob, but there was something, and maybe if Superintendent Gryzkowiak can kind of go back to this or answer this. It says in the supplemental notes from the May 13th board meeting, it says that, let me just read it. It says currently HIAC is facilitating cable connections through charter or making connections through their current network services. The district is funding these short-term connections for those that did not have home internet access with CARES, the relief dollars from CARES, and HIAC is an authorized charter agent. So have they made any inroads to connecting some of those people? Or I guess I'm wondering, have they connected some of the people that we're referring to?
Yes, we've got about 25 homes, either on a CenturyLink, a HIAC connection, or a charter connection right now. And so they're because they can do the hookup, the install, and the billing all at once. We'll use the federal dollars to get some of those kids short-term stuff for right now.
So, and short-term wasn't defined there. Well, are we talking?
Our short-term was December 31st.
Okay.
We were anticipating having to be out and need some additional connection. Again, probably at least through the end of the year, figuring that we would probably be out or in some sort of, blended education model through the end of the, again, 2020. And so,
okay.
Yeah, we kind of guessed, and we looked like we may have guessed right again, but it's that unknown again. And Mr. Snedden's right. We're moving at light speed. And again, so it may be exploiting and using whatever network we have available to get kids connections. It may not be the optimal connection of a fiber connection. So,
well, we don't have fiber, so
right.
Yeah, I mean,
well, when we were looking at the map and looking at where they were doing it and trying to get to the heart of the areas where most of the kids live, one of the comments was, well, it's not going that far out roady. It looks like you're out of luck. And I'm like, well, I would love to have fiber out there, but I might be the youngest one that lives in my housing development. So they're not worried about education, getting kids on the internet out here on, next door to me.
Sure. Okay, so we have made some progress though. Yeah, that's it, Guy.
Okay, thanks, sir. Paul, go ahead, Paul. Paul, you're still mute.
All right, I'm off now. All right. Yeah, I really appreciate everybody giving their ideas and that sort of thing. And it's been really, really interesting to kind of think through those scenarios. I think there's going to be a whole mishmash of stuff we're going to have to do to try to serve as many students as possible, in town versus out of town, using using the state fire stations or the Grange halls or whatever. The one thing that I keep kind of wrestling with is that we are this social safety net for for our students, for a lot of our students, even though, you know, we're supposed to be just education, it's developed, the schools are a lot more than that now. And I just, you know, want to try as much as we can to get it and keep that social safety net going as much as we can. So, you know, trying to think out of the box of how we can get those students into the school as much as possible. I think is pretty critical. And then you know, there's been some discussion too about the future of education, and that kind of gets back to that social safety net is, yeah, it's, you know, there's probably going to be more virtual stuff going on, but there's still going to need places for kids to come to learn and be safe, and to be able to teach all kids. You know, our motto is to teach to their greatest potential, and definitely virtual isn't that for everybody.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Okay, I thought Bob was there, but it was just his dog. So think about our wonderful, generous community, and think about how many people in the community are willing to support schools with school supplies, with helping with lunch programs, with all kinds of things. And I'm just wondering, you know, if we had, now our internet is $45 a month. And that's, you know, that's our access and the modem that we have. So what would be wrong with coming up with the students who don't have internet access and finding out if there's some generous person in the community that has $45 or $50 to pay for that family to have internet access and a modem? Maybe take care of the problem until we can come up with a more solid plan.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. That would be fantastic. Honestly, it would be fantastic. I'm all for it, as well as grants. I think it'd be great. I just want to direct us a little bit back to our goal here tonight, and we're not taking a vote, just so everybody knows. But what we need to do is, as a board, decide whether or not this is a problem that our administration should spend more time looking for solutions for, whether they be grants or funded through our budget or funded through some other means. Is this something this board feels like is going to be an ongoing problem through the next year and years after that needs to be addressed, either due to COVID or due to poverty or simply due to no access to high-speed internet? You've heard from our administration and our educators what we're looking at, and there are definitely priorities we have as a school across the board. And so at this point, I want to kind of throw the floor open one more time. And John, I haven't even asked you if you have a comment. So when I get done here, if you have a comment, you jump right in. But I would like us to give this administration some direction on where to go, and understand the things I've asked you guys on this board about. There are no precedents for. There's nothing at OSBA. There are no manuals on how to give somebody internet connection from a school. There are no entitlement programs out there that we can draw on. We are way out in front of an issue, and I accept the fact that maybe we're too far out in front of an issue. so please, let's do what we think is best, but let's do what we think's right as well. So sorry, John, go ahead. You got any comments? I know you do. Still muted, John.
There we are. Got it. Well, I mean, my perspective on this is that, I mean, it's a huge budgetary concern, but I think from what we've heard from administration tonight and, other board members, I mean, I echo a lot of what I've heard tonight. And I think that this is going to be a problem we're going to face on one level or another. We don't know what fall is going to look like. There's a lot of uncertainties. What we do know, or I would say, at least me personally think that, about 90% sure that it's going to look different than what we're used to. If nothing else, at least for a time. And I think education moving forward, the model's going to look at least a little different. There's going to be more leaning on distance learning. And I think no matter what that future looks like, I think this is something we need to at least explore. We need to, if bare minimum, look and see what funding sources would be. We heard from Lane County tonight talking about they're willing to help us research grants. They're helping us to look for additional funding sources. I mean, I get that, Lane County is dealing with, tremendous budget issues all. I think it's well worth, continuing doing research and seeing what our options are going to be, whether it's going to be hotspots, whether it's using, a HIAC in some form or another to help facilitate, whether it's going to be charter, whether it's going to be fiber, whatever the case is going to be. I think it's worth looking at seeing what potential, CARES Act funding's available. I know there's some grants that are coming open based off of recent legislation. So I guess my perspective is no matter what we look at in the fall, it's going to look some different. And I'd love to see kids in the classroom 5 days a week, but we need to plan for the potential reality that we may be looking at, a rotating schedule, in which case we are going to be leaning harder on distance learning. And if that's the case, we've got to have connectivity. We're getting mandated from the state that we have to be able to try and facilitate that. I think we've been, severely ahead of the curve in what our planning was, without the idea of knowing that we were going to be getting a severe budget cut, which obviously changes our whole reality of what we're looking at. But my personal opinion is I would like to see administration continuing to, partner and seeing what options are available. Even if, like Suzanne was saying, even if it's at the local level or whether it's on up to the federal level, I think it's worth looking at options and being able to partner with people that have our local and our kids' interests in mind. And I think that's really all I got to say about that.
Thank you, sir. Bob, you want to kind of let administration know how you feel going forward on that question?
Yeah, first of all, I really, really appreciate the effort that they put into it, because I think they've given us lots of information. I think it's something that we are ultimately gonna need to look at. John referred to it. Things are changing. We're gonna be having to deal with all kinds of different models, but I don't think I'd like to have staff focus on this as an imminent. In other words, it's not something that we want a full report and expect to take action on this budget year or even the first half of next budget year. But anything that we can come up with on a short term to help people get internet connections so their students can do their online learning, we should look at, even if it's on a case-by-case basis. But the information is very good. And like I mentioned last week, this venue is just darn near impossible for me to think about it and conceptualize and then discuss it intelligently. But not a high priority, but definitely if something comes up, I think we should pursue it.
Diane, would you like to let the board know how you feel and how they should proceed?
Well, I feel very much really echo what Bob just had to say. The budget is concerning. This is something that, our kids will need access. We know that. I don't want them to have to invest a huge amount of time trying to rush something through. We need to take our time, look for sources, for monetary sources. They're out there. and really focus, if anything, focus on that. Get help writing those grants. Look for community partners. Find the money. I think that's really where we need to be headed.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
Yeah, it's, I think it is a priority right now, but I think it's a priority to explore all the options that are there. And like I said before, I think it's going to be a combination of things that we need to look at. And I do agree we don't have the money to spend on it. But like Diana said, I think there's opportunities to find that and be prepared for that. So we have to be able to do our research and our analysis on the different options to be able to respond to that money when it does become available. So I think they should still keep working on it and continue to bring us ideas and suggestions and do the best they can to get us ready for starting in September.
Thank you. Dennis, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'll go next. I don't know that when we say priority, it's important. We need to keep looking at how are we going to meet the needs of those kids that don't have connectivity. But if I was to just kind of spitball the priority level, I'd say I'd go 80% administrators should be looking at those rotating schedules and where we're going to put people in those tiny little spaces. That would be maybe 80%, 85, 90%. But yeah, we still need to be exploring how society is going to deal with this. We're going to have to step in. And I think probably the best way to step in would be on an individual basis as they start cropping up in the fall. But between now and then, that 15, 20%, we should still be looking at the whole issue of our role in this deficiency in society for connectivity. So the percentage, I'd go 85, 15. Administrators should be working on the minutia of getting those kids back in 2 days a week or 3 days a week, whatever. That's it.
Thanks, sir. Suzanne?
Well, I like the term mosaic. That's kind of an artistic and varied approach to things. And I think that's the way we should go. And yes, I definitely think the administration will need to continue to research and come up with options and solutions. And Dennis is right. I mean, there's a whole lot of things the administration has to be doing, reworking, the curriculum and figuring out where kids are going to be. There's a whole lot of work to be done, and it's huge. But I really think that definitely down the road, it would be great to have the fiber optics communication system network through the community so that students and anybody else who could benefit from it would have access to it. But right now, at this moment in time, I think we have to come up with alternative plans that are economically feasible and that can be scaled down to actually address those students who don't have access. Because as Andy said, a lot of our students do, and it's not a problem. So it feels kind of like Band-Aids, but I think that's where we're at right now, is doing those Band-Aids while we can come up with a better plan.
Thanks, Suzanne. All right, Mr. G. I think that's about the best answer you're going to get going forward as far as how the board feels on the importance of this. There are a lot of issues at play here besides just whether or not somebody gets connectivity from the school. Obviously, there's a lot of policies and whatnot that'll have to be thought of, as well as potential ramifications of bad usage of our gifts, should we give them as well. So if you don't require anything more of the board, I'm going to close this work session out. Andy?
Now, again, we're going to focus on two priorities, and number one is going to be anticipating physical distancing guidelines, a hybrid attendance model with rotational attendance. And then we will look at what kind of relief funds there are available for students that need access, and then probably put out a call to the community of, adopt a net kid and see if you can't help them provide internet for kids to education until we can be 5x5 on campus every day of the week.
Okay,
Guy,
thank you, sir. Oh,
Guy, if you don't mind me jumping in here, I'm sorry.
Please.
Without
No, go ahead.
my camera, I just want to say, Bob, thank you for bringing Austin in. And I would love to make that connection with Austin on the finance piece. You mentioned that there was some potential grants and things out there, and I'd love to connect.
Well, I didn't invite him, but I did suggest he be invited, and you're welcome, Carrie.
That works perfectly for me too, Bob.
Okay, if there's nothing further, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, seconded by Dennis. All in favor, just hang up.
Good night, everyone.